Morning, everybody. Welcome back. And so I'm going to continue or at least I hope to continue my Snowy Scares series of reviews, where I have a look at some horror stories that are set in a winter setting. Now, the story that I want to look at today is one of the lesser known, well, not maybe lesser known, but one of very few Stephen King stories that hasn't been adapted into a film, and that would be The Breathing Method. Now, it was published in, I believe it was 1983, in different seasons, and it was the last story in the book. Different seasons, in case you forget, was also included Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption, Apt Pupil, and The Body, all of which have been adapted into movies, and each sort of nominally had a theme relating to the seasons, so spring, summer, fall, and the subtitle of The Breathing Method was A Winter's Tale. So that's why I decided to include it in this series. Now, if you're not familiar with the book, or if you haven't read it, which, if you haven't read it, Different Seasons is a really good place to start if you're not a horror fan, but you're interested in reading some of Stephen King's books, because it's filled with stories that aren't really horror stories, in the same sense that some of his other work, is more blatantly horror, like Pet Sematary. So, The Breathing Method has a frame story. Now, again, I don't really like frame stories, because I've always said this. Horror is based on an emotion, and so it has to be immediate in order to make your reader feel what the characters are going through. And so the more removed and the more layers you get away from the story and away from the emotions that the characters are feeling, then the less impactful it's going to be, in my opinion. But anyway, so the frame story follows a guy named David, who is a middle-aged lawyer, and one night his boss invites him to this gentleman's club where, they smoke cigars and drink scotch, and he's wandering around and finds some weird books that he's never seen before. And he goes, and then, he has a chat with his wife, and then he goes back. And it turns out that these guys like to sit around and tell stories. Different kinds of stories. War stories, love stories, stories about things that happen to them, whatever. But every year at Christmas time, their particular story is always a story of the uncanny. So this particular night, the tale of the uncanny is offered up by, I can't remember his name, I can't remember what his name is, something like McCannon, something like that. Anyway, and this doctor is now in his 80s, and he was born right in New York City, where the book is set. And it's also an interesting period piece, because he talks about how there used to be actual sheep in Central Park, because this was before the days of lawnmowers, so they would keep sheep and goats to keep the grass down. And he's a war veteran, and he went to school during the 1920s, and he talks about how, being a post-war doctor, he got to see a lot of horrors that a lot of other doctors don't, and so on. He goes on. So, this particular story, one day a young woman who is pregnant out of wedlock in I believe it's the late 30s, that the book is, or that the main section of the story is set. And she's poor, and she's unmarried. And of course, for a woman in those days, there just was nothing at all that they could do. Abortion wasn't a possibility. So through the course of the story, he got to know her and he got to admire her. And she was very strong and very resilient, and it sort of keeps coming back to that. And then in the last section of the book, I believe it's Christmas Eve, and there's a horrible accident, and she's decapitated. But she still continues to do these breathing exercises to help her through labor. And he delivers the baby, and the baby's fine. But somehow her head has managed to be, separated, but she's still somehow conscious. And that's what makes it Tale of the Uncanny in a horror story, of course. It's a pretty good tale. It's pretty gripping. It's a little bit different, a little bit unusual from what King was writing at the time. But it's definitely worth a read. I'd give it probably about 4 stars. Maybe 3.5 to 4 stars. Not the best story I've read yet, but it's still a nice little tale for winter. And it's a nice way to cap off the 4 stories in different seasons. So if you like King and if you like unusual stories, it's worth a read. And it's never been made into a movie, although it has been optioned. It's another one that's just kind of been sitting in development hell for... it was announced in 2012 that somebody was going to make a movie of it, and it's just never happened. So maybe there will be a movie someday, maybe not. And the other thing that I like about... that I've always thought about the breathing method, getting back to frame stories, is that if they were ever going to do another anthology, that one would make a really good... the idea of these old guys in a gentleman's club sitting around telling stories, I think would be a really good frame for an anthology series. Because we do get to revisit the gentleman's club later in a short story called The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands. So... if anybody out there wants TV ideas, that would be... Sorry, somebody just walked by. Talking to myself. That would be a good one. That would be a fun show I would watch. Excuse me. And the last thing, my laptop broke again. So my uploading is going to be a little bit sporadic for the next few weeks. Hopefully I can borrow my nephew's laptop maybe once or twice a week, but I don't know. I'm going to just record a bunch of these and I'll upload them when I can. But I hope you're reading lots of horror. Stay safe. Have a great day.